How we doing, everybody? You can unmute if you want and say hi.
Hi, everybody.
Lovely background, Rabbi.
Yeah, you see him in the spirit.
Hi,
Very
everybody.
So this is going to be a half-hour class, right?
Yeah, we're going to keep it shorter today.
It's going to be fast, right?
Oh, my God.
It's going to be good.
Hi, everybody.
Hi,
Hello,
Deb.
everybody.
Hi.
Hey, Marilyn. Hey, Sandy.
Hi, Bon. Hi, everybody.
This looks like a full class. I see Marilyn and Bernie, although I don't see them. Their name.
Marilyn and Bernie, can we see you?
I'm hiding.
Okay,
There you are.
Bernie.
There we go.
All you see is my head.
Hi, That's better, Linda. Bernie.
Somewhere.
You're only seeing the top of your head.
Yeah.
It's all there. What do you want?
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, good to be with everybody.
Hi.
Hi, everybody.
I agree.
So, new. Hopefully we're all doing okay. Ready for some more inspiring words from Ecclesiastes? You know, who had a nice bowl of ice cream after the last class, you know? Everything is futile. Have some cookie dough ice cream. It makes you feel a little better. Oh, my goodness. We're going to dive in today with some more Ecclesiastes. We're actually doing a little bit differently this week. I took some excerpts from the 9 chapters or whatever it is that we have left because I want to get done with Ecclesiastes today. So we're going to hit some of the high notes, so to speak, maybe the low notes, however we want to look at it. And that way next week we can start fresh with our next one, which will be Proverbs next week. Actually, I'm wrong. Special announcement. Next week's class, we're going to actually partner with the Florida Holocaust Museum. They're running a lecture next week on anti-Semitism with some really cool speakers. So we're actually going to do that next week as a special event, a special offering, because when our partners in the community have a really great event, and especially one as important, speaking about anti-Semitism today, with some high-profile speakers, I think it's a good opportunity for us to partner with them and sort of direct our attentions in that direction. Anti-Semitism is very pressing. You know, obviously, in Proverbs has been around for a couple thousand years. I can wait another week, and it'll be all right. Okay. With that said, let us join together in the blessing for the study of Torah. Last 3 words: La'asok b'divrei Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So we thank the God who commands us to be engaged with the work of studying Torah. And boom, we should have our screen share. So last week we began this very uplifting tome that speaks about how everything is futile and that everything is temporary and ephemeral and that God controls everything, including our fortunes. So I work so hard, depending on which chapter you're reading. And so we're going to touch upon some of those points today and sort of maybe get a sense of where the author is coming from on this. So, and of course we have to get to the, what I like to refer to as either the M. Night Shyamalan twist ending of the Book of Ecclesiastes or the Disney version, of the end of Ecclesiastes, however one wants to look at it. We'll get to that towards the end of our discussion tonight. Okay, so with that said, Debbie Siegel. Debbie, how you doing?
How are you?
I'm okay. You want to start reading a little bit for us? Can you see the screen?
I surely will.
Thank you.
Chapter 4. I further observed all the oppression that goes on under the sun, the tears of the oppressed with none to comfort them, and the power of their oppressors with none to comfort them. Then I accounted those who died long since more fortunate than those who are still living. And happier than ever are those who have not yet come into being and have never witnessed the miseries that go on under the sun.
Woohoo!
Wow, we're starting off depressing again.
Starting off with some really cheery, lightheaded stuff, lighthearted stuff. So the first part, I'm assuming that, well, we'll read the thing again in a way, but so he witnesses oppression, right? And the idea of no one to comfort them, and that's not great. And the power of the oppressors. I'm making an assumption that none to comfort them does not refer to the oppressors, but refers to those who are being oppressed. That's just my reading of it. It's a little bit, the syntax is a little tough, but that is my assumption. He's talking about comforting the oppressors. I think he's talking about comforting those who are being oppressed, you know, and that there's a lot of power there, with the idea being obviously that there is, and we'll see this as a theme, a lack, a dearth of justice, right, in the world that he is responding to, that he sees things going on that aren't so great, right? And rather than, as I hope we would, when we see injustice and we see oppression, rather than digging in his heels, you know, and getting his hands dirty and sort of working for justice, he sort of is very depressed by it, and you know, sort of says, you know, like it's almost better not even to be born than to be born into all this mishigas, because that's how terrible the world is. That those who die don't have to see this mishigas, you know, that's better than having to actually be alive to witness all this injustice in the world. And if you've never been born yet, even better, you know. So it's interesting, to me at least, that the even better is the people who have not been born yet, because, you know, they will be born, you know, right, potentially, right, they will be born, and then they'll have to face these moments. There's an interesting parallel that he has throughout the work about the idea of potential, right, versus being fatalistic. That there is potential, perhaps, for one who is young to do great things, but then there's also in his mind also a negative sort of as well, that things might turn out sour. So in a way, you know, he's saying, well, it's better to be gone, so to speak, better to be deceased. So you don't have to worry about any of this anymore. You're out of it. You know, you're out of the game. You can't win if you don't play. And then, you know, also he could say you can't lose if you don't play, right? So if you're out of it, then you don't have to worry about it anymore. All this stress, all this agita, you're done. You know, don't worry about it. You know, you don't have to worry. I mean, I people sometimes talk about sort of death and dying, and it's like, well, you know, after it happens, you have nothing to worry about anymore. You worry before you die. After you die, you don't have to worry about death anymore. It's already happened.
Yeah.
You know, you say it nicer than that, but that's exactly right. I mean, I had someone once tell me, it's like, Rabbi, I'm not afraid, he said to me, of death. He said he's afraid of dying. And, you know, because those are very different things. Because once you've already passed on, nothing more to worry about. But you might worry about getting there, so to speak.
There's no, I don't know if there's no mention of any kind of having a legacy.
So he is very dubious on legacy, because it is something that is out of human control, in a way. That's sort of his struggle with legacy. That you can build something. You know, he writes about this. You can build something, right? You can create something during your lifetime. It can be magnificent, and then after you die, some bozo can come and destroy what you built. And or not, we don't know. And then that's his frustration, right? is that we don't have that control. Very much like the Hamilton, who lives, who dies, who tells your story, right? That we don't have control over those things according to the play, according to the lyrics of the musical, because we don't know what's going to happen after us. We can control only so much, while we're alive. And after we pass on, we can do our best, right, while we live to create a narrative, to create a legacy, but we don't know what's going to happen after.
Rabbi, a lot of those words could really be taken of what's happening now with the coronavirus.
Indeed. That is very true. I think it is applicable.
I was thinking that.
Yeah. And that it just feels very overwhelming and very depressing. And what a thing to sort of be involved with, and how, again, there's only so many things we can control. And that's very true. I had someone tell me recently when it comes to COVID that, for many of us, it's not even a question of if we get it, it's when we get it at this point, and like what's going to happen afterwards. And I don't know how true that is, but that being said, it just makes me think about how important it is to take precautions, especially if you're someone who is potentially susceptible and compromised. Yeah.
Hey, could you lower that a smidge?
Say, I apologize, Rabbi. I missed last week.
Yeah.
Who is speaking here?
This is Kohelet. This is the Book of Ecclesiastes. And so the author, we don't know. It is purported to be Solomon, but it's not. I mean, that's who it's ascribed to. But by the language of the text and by the use of Persian loanwords, amongst other issues, it dates much later than the reign of Solomon. But according to tradition, he writes this in his older, cynical, skeptical years.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. No, thanks for the question. Okay, let's keep it rolling.
How does he know that? How does he know that the dead is happier?
That's what he.
I don't understand, but it is so important that they're happier. They're dead.
Yeah, because he's saying because they're dead, they don't have to worry about it anymore. That when you're alive, you have stress.
But they might not be happier. You know that.
Yeah, well, he's guessing they are. That's going to be his assumption. Because you also have to remember, in this author's case, there's no real understanding of afterlife. There's no real understanding of heaven or hell or any of that stuff. This author doesn't have it. So he assumes that when you're dead, that's it. It's game over. Nothing else is happening to you. You're just gone. And so that's why he can sort of say it, because he's not assuming there's going to be tortures in the afterlife or whatever it is. He's just assuming that dead means the end. Nothing else afterwards. Later on, we get to read in ideas of afterlife into this. And the rabbis will say, well, it means that this is only true while we live in this world. But in the next world, in Olam Haba, in the world to come, then it's different, then it's better. And that's how we can rationalize some of this guy's depressed rantings that we have here. Because it's a little depressed. A little depressed. Even this one over here, and Sharon, you want to take a look at this one over here? I have also noted.
I have also noted that all labor and skillful enterprise come from individuals' envy of each other, another futility and pursuit of wind.
Yeah, it's this stress, right? And this one I love too, only because this also feels very relevant to today. Is this idea that we work hard sometimes just to keep up with other people, and to have what they have, and to do better than other people, because it's envy. And then we work really hard, we break our teeth, and for what in the end? Chasing the wind, more futility, right? Because you can work really hard and buy that brand new Ferrari, but then you're going to die the next day maybe, and you don't enjoy it. So you worked really hard for nothing, or you have the Ferrari and it doesn't bring you happiness. And then you have to work even harder to buy another, sports car, and work even harder to buy another luxury item, because you're never content, you're never happy, because you keep on buying more stuff to have, to connect with, and that's not good for Kohelet. He says that's chasing the wind, because you're not gonna be happy. You're gonna keep on pushing yourself to work harder and do more, but the goal is never gonna be achieved, and you're never gonna find fulfillment with it, especially when it comes out of envy. So again, that doesn't work either. Shaq, when it's gone, better or poor youth, or better or poor but wise.
Did you ask me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Better a poor but wise youth than an old but foolish king who no longer has the sense to heed warnings. For the former can emerge from a dungeon to become king, while the latter, even if born to kingship, can become a pauper.
So it's not so good to be the king. Mel Brooks was wrong. Not so good to be. I love this passage too, because at least here, and I'm going to read it a little bit differently maybe, but here at least there's a little bit of optimism, sort of, in a way, because he says that if you're poor but wise, you can rise up, right? You can, achieve. You can do better things. If you're the king, there ain't nowhere to go but down. It's only going to get worse for you. It can't get better. You're already at the top of the food chain. And when you're at the top of the food chain, what happens? It's like there's some stagnancy, obviously. And again, things, I feel like it's so Jewish. Things can always get worse. It's a Yiddish curse. Things can always get worse.
Right.
So count your blessings when you have them, because you never know what is around the corner waiting to smack you in the head. Man, it's a rough read. I'm not going to tell you no. Just hold on for 1 second while I check this. Oh my goodness gracious. Okay. So, let's see here. So let's go to the next thing here. And Bonnie, you want to pick that up over there?
Your mouth from being rash, and let not your throat be quick to bring forth speech before God. For God is in heaven, and you are on earth. That is why your words should be few. Just as dreams come with much brooding, so does foolish utterance come with much speech. When you make a vow to God, do not delay to fulfill it, for God has no pleasure in fools. What you vow, fulfill. It is better not to vow at all than to vow and not fulfill.
Okay, so a lot of stuff here about language, right? So first part's pretty easy. Watch your words, right? Watch what you say. Don't, bring forth speech unnecessarily. Sort of the idea of having few words and making them meaningful, I think, is the sense here. And I think it's also in the second sentence, for God is in heaven, you're on earth, right? Is perhaps, to me at least, the way I read it is, be careful of being too sure of yourself, right? Maybe don't be so cocky, don't be so arrogant that you think you know everything, and then you can pontificate, about it. Because maybe you don't know. Maybe you don't know what's going to happen next, or you don't know what's going on. So better to not speak a lot about it and reveal yourself as foolish. So as dreams come with much brooding, because if we are feeling restless, whatever it might be, or feeling stressed, maybe we have more dreams. But if we have a lot of speech, there's a good chance you're going to say something stupid. Is how I sort of read this. The more you talk, the better a chance it is you're going to say something that is not helpful. Now, so that's sort of the part A of this little part of this passage. Part B, we just passed it a few weeks ago, right? Kol Nidre, all our vows, right? So we talk about, the idea of making promises to God, and we get this a lot in the Torah as well, about vowing and there being, some power in that. But even in the Torah, we have this understanding that maybe, don't vow so much, because you make a promise before God that has meaning and that has power to it. And if you don't fulfill it, it's going to be a problem for you. And what Kohelet is saying here, I think, especially towards the end, is that no one's got a gun to your head. You don't have to make these vows to God. So why? Like, why do it and make this promise? Because if you screw it up, it's going to be a big problem. Better not to vow at all. He's not saying don't keep your word, I think. It's just don't, make these big grandiose promises to God because maybe you won't be able to fulfill it. Make sense?
Yeah. This doesn't seem as negative for the first
No,
time.
you're a little different. You're a little bit of worldly wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
I think finally it's here a little bit.
Sounds more like a warning.
Yeah, I think definitely it's a warning because he's trying to give some wisdom, some ideas on how we're supposed to live. That's what this book really is all about. It's just some of the wisdom is a little bit dark, and here I think it's definitely I think it's meant to alert us maybe to, again, the power of words and how important maybe being circumspect in our language is. And really here talking about our communication with the divine in particular. Okay. I love this one because this one also feels very, I could find some relevance in this one. I'll put it that way. So that's all I'm going to say about that. Renee, you want to read this one over here?
If you see in a province oppression of the poor and suppression of right and justice, don't wonder at the fact, for one high official is protected by a higher one, and both of them by still higher ones.
A lot of one hand washing the other, a lot of perhaps unethical behavior that is able to be done when people in power are in cahoots together, when no one is having any sense of accountability, that you can, oppress and suppress those who are weak. If there's no one powerful enough to stand up for righteousness. I think that's what you sort of see here. Don't be surprised. That's the way of the world. People are able to oppress, others if no one is going to, again, be strong enough to call out the hypocrisy and the protection, of immoral behavior. They all just protect each other, and the people down below get the wrong end of it. Renee, you want to read a little bit more?
A lover, oops, where'd you go?
That's me.
A lover of money never has his fill of money, nor a lover of wealth his fill of income. That too is futile. As his substance increases, so do those who consume it. What, then, does the success of its owner amount to but feasting his eyes? A worker's sleep is sweet, whether he has much or little to eat, but the rich man's abundance doesn't let him sleep.
When I read this, by the way, it also feels like one of those things that only someone who has money could write.
Right.
I think that's also
true.
part of this as well. And Kohelet, remember, is supposed to be a king, right? And so the first part we sort of touched upon already, the idea of the insatiability of material desire, that if you really want money, if you really like stuff, you could always have more stuff. And you're never going to be satisfied if that's where you derive your pleasure, right? And that, of course, is futile because you always want more. But he takes it to a different level. And here I think about, and you see this sometimes in with athletes, in a way, that athletes who might not have a lot of money in the beginning sort of their lives, they get a lot of money when they become professionals, right? When they become famous, but they also have hangers on. They have people who are sort of like with them that take their money and they're responsible for. So it's almost like, you can get more money, but then everyone else wants it too. And so everyone else is coming to take, your money, take your possessions. So you wind up in a bad spot no matter what, right? So you're being successful, but then other people are sort of glomming onto your success and taking your resources, from you. And then this say again?
But I don't think that has that. I don't think it doesn't let him sleep. He will sleep.
He might sleep. It's like
on one side, and the worker sleeps and is sweet. That is not true either.
Yeah, as I'm saying, this is one of those lines.
It's not a sweet sleep because he might not have very much. And then super rich. Why doesn't he can sleep too. He might have other problems, but he will sleep.
I'm with you on that one. I think that's what I'm saying. This is something I think someone with money could write, because with that said, a worker's sleep can be sweet, if there's a sense of contentment, and you're right, a sense of of sufficiency. But if not, then of course that's going to be a restless sleep as well. And for the rich man, same way, in a way that, I think he's envisioning a rich person who's always worried, always looking over their shoulder for the person who's going to come take their money, who's going to, try to cheat them or try to rob them, and they're in a big fancy house and they have to have cameras everywhere and security because they're so worried that someone's going to take them of their possessions. If you have nothing, you don't have to worry about getting robbed, which might not be comforting either, right? I think it goes back to the wise but poor pauper versus the king, right? Is that when you're a poor but wise pauper, you got nowhere to go but up. You can sort of work hard and do better and whatever it might be. And if you're a king, you got nowhere to go but down. That you're always worried about plots and betrayals and people trying to take what's yours and the responsibility keeping you up awake at night. But it can certainly cut the other way as well. I can definitely see that. Yeah, Debbie?
Rabbi, were these statements written as advice, or just, it so much sounds like Confucius. Confucius say, a lover of money never has his fill of money, or a lover of wealth is fill of income. It just seems like Proverbs or something.
Yeah, this is a more put together work than Proverbs, which is a little bit more disjointed. But yes, this was definitely put together as, words to live by, words to take.
Words of wisdom.
Yeah, words of wisdom. Exactly right. Yeah, Debbie, is it you have a question?
Yes. What was going on when this was written that he was inspired to write this, but yet it relates to modern society now?
I would say, like any good biblical book, I think you might have heard me say before, one of the reasons why the Bible is a bestseller, so to speak, is because we can read into it and we can sort of apply it to daily life. That's what gets you, still published after 2,000 plus years, right? Is that it can apply still to daily life. And a book like this, it's interesting because we don't have a proper date for it. We have a sense, 5th century to 3rd century BCE. We're talking about, Persian period, maybe even to Greek, to the Greek takeover, of the region. In terms of a historical context, that the latest this could be is probably late Greek in terms of the time period. And one can probably, from the themes of it, say that this is probably influenced perhaps by some Greek wisdom literature as well, because we have some models of this in Greek literature. We have some similar models actually in Egyptian literature as well. Some similarities. So I think there's a greater context that this was maybe a thought that people had at the time. This is sort of the Jewish expression of it, and one that is now and was then very controversial in its time, because that it does not really jibe with what is going to be rabbinic Judaism. That this is going to have to be interpreted in a very different way in order to make this fit with rabbinic teaching. Because a lot of this is a little bit too dire and a little bit too random. Because biblical literature, you have to remember, the heart of the biblical argument when it comes to all matters of making one's way in the world is you do good stuff, good things happen. You do bad stuff, bad things happen. Obey God, do the commandments, live right. And this guy's saying, everything's terrible. You can do good things and then bad stuff's going to happen, which, by the way, is true. And that's sort of the issue, right, that it comes down to, is that, yes, this is definitely a little bit gloomy, but there's a greater sense here that we don't have the control, and sometimes in the world, bad stuff happens that we can't explain. That you could do the right things, and bad stuff can happen, and in the end, you're going to die. And so how do we live with that in a way? You can either, and I think that we spoke a little bit about it last week, is that I don't think he's advocating writ large for hedonism, even though it has a little bit of that in here as well. I think that's taking it too far, that this idea that the entire point of life is just, enjoy life while it's here because you're going to die soon. I don't think it's that per se, but I think he does have some of that in here that tempered, don't go too far, don't live life to the extremes, but recognize that life is finite, and that there's a time for everything. And don't, even though this is hard and there are harsh realities that we have here, that, that we can't give up in a way. We have to still have some enjoyment, even with these tough truths being still here. That yes, we are finite. Yes, we're going to die. Yes, there are things that we don't know what's going to happen to us tomorrow, right? Much less what's going to happen to us in 10 years, 20 years, or what happens after we pass on. We don't have any control over it. So have a steak. Be good to each other. Now, have that second slice of pie. Because in the end, you're not going to be worrying about that later. You have other stuff to worry about.
Thank you for the response.
Yeah, I try my best. This is, good stuff, I think, a little bit tough. As I'm speaking out, by the way, here it comes, right? Another grave evil is this. He must depart as just as he came. As he came out of his mother's womb, so must he depart at last, naked as he came. He can take nothing of his wealth to carry with him. So, again, it's too much. Maybe don't worry so much about those material possessions. Because in the end, you can't take it with you. You can't take it with you. Sandy, you want to unmute and read a little bit?
Sure.
Okay.
Chapter 7. A good name is better than fragrant oil, and the day of death than the day of birth. It is better to go to a house of mourning than to a house of feasting, for that is the end of every human being, and a living one should take it to heart. One should take it to heart.
This is a very interesting passage, I think, for a number of reasons. And it is almost like three separate phrases in a way, but it also, I think, is tied together, I think, by a very interesting idea. So a good name is better than fragrant oil. We actually use that, for funerals, and we use it for other things. The idea that what's the most important thing? It's not your material possessions. It's how you were looked upon while you live, right? That's part of the legacy question, right? Is that like fragrant oil leaves a good smell, right? And it's something that is pleasurable. A good name is similar, that when people speak our names, I think about this imagery a lot. When people speak our names, do they speak it with a smile or a frown? And if they say, "That darn rabbi," that's not great. You want to say Rabbi Lobel, not Rabbi Lobel. You know, like when they speak of you, you hope that it's better. You can't control it, as I'll say again, right? But you want to give it a shot, to have people that think well of you, of what you're doing in the world, and that you're creating a good name for yourself, a good legacy. Now, this next part, I think I'm going to interpret positively, even though it sounds a little bit rough. The day of death better than the day of birth. This goes back to potentiality and fatalism once again. So the idea being here is that on the day of death, that being better is that you've lived your life and you've accomplished, God willing, whatever you wanted to accomplish. Maybe you've given your best, you've given your all, and then maybe you pass away and you've done it already. Whereas when you just start out, who knows what's going to happen? It could be terrible, it could be just this really, God forbid, an unpleasant experience filled with, with pain and with unpleasantness and with, difficulty. We don't know that when we're born. So when we die, we let go of that part of it, that part's over already. And if we have, God forbid, a life of a lot of pain and sorrow and misery, maybe death isn't as gloomy as it would be for someone who, is living a very positive life. I'm not, I'm saying a life that is, that is cherished. Because we view death, obviously, we have a fear of death, right? We're scared of death, and this is part of the trouble of the book, right? Is that he puts death in our face a lot, and having us confront the idea that we are going to die. And so what do we do then with what we have while we're here? And again, I like to view this next part. Why is it better to go to a house of mourning than a house of feasting? Why is that better?
It takes much more emotion and empathy and thought, and to do something, go someplace sad or, not as pleasant as going to eat.
Yeah, but you think more, right? It causes you to reflect on what's important. That's how I sort of look at this in a way, is that when you go to a house of mourning, what's happening? You're telling stories, right? You're learning about the deceased maybe a little bit more. You're consoling each other. You're having meaty conversations, perhaps. You're having philosophical thoughts, and maybe it does prioritize, gives you a sense of your priorities a little bit more than they were before. As opposed to a house of feasting, it's a party. What do you learn from a party? Maybe not now you might take some joy out of it, right? But if joy is vanity, like everything else, whatever it might be, here at least you have a sense of importance and of seriousness, and perhaps it leads you to live your life differently. It refocuses you in a different way. Okay, let's pick a Sandy. You want to keep going here? In my own brief span.
Sure. In my own brief span of life, I have seen both these things. Sometimes a good person perishes in spite of their goodness, and sometimes a wicked one endures in spite of their wickedness. So don't overdo goodness, and don't act the wise to excess, or you may be dumbfounded. Don't overdo wickedness, and don't be a fool, or you may die before your time.
I love it. Wow. This is so rough. But
this is a good one.
But it's a great paragraph. It really is, from a philosophical standpoint. It's so out of parsing, but it's interesting. So he asks the big question right in the beginning. The big question's there, and it's in big flashing letters, basically. Bad stuff can happen to a good person, and sometimes terrible people do great. So you take those first couple sentences, right? And the rabbis look at this and they say unrabbinic words when they read this sentence, okay? Because they got to deal with this now, and this is a problem, this sentence, because again, it undercuts the entire biblical perspective. This is what happens with Job, right? In that book as well. It's the same problem. You have these righteous people whose lives are not going well, and wicked people whose lives are going great. And the question of why bad things happen to good people, and why do the wicked flourish, has probably driven more people away from organized religion than almost anything else, because it strikes at the heart of religious belief. Is that if the whole point is be good and God will reward you, not the whole point, but if a core theory is that the righteous are rewarded and the wicked are punished, because that's just. But then you have righteous people who suffer and wicked people who flourish. That is by definition unjust, according to the rabbinic perspective. So what do you do with this? How do you square the circle?
You still try and do good.
You still try to do good. That's a good start.
Don't overdo it. That's all.
You don't overdo it, and then you create afterlife.
Oh.
That's how you get rid of this. You create afterlife.
Wow. We don't believe in that, do we?
I thought we didn't believe in that.
Yeah. Right.
Who's we, Kimosabi?
Jews. I thought Jewish people didn't believe in an afterlife.
Oh, silly rabbit. Tricks are for kids. There is a ton of afterlife. In the Talmud, there's a ton of afterlife.
Really?
In mysticism, a ton of afterlife in a lot of places. We as Reformed Jews don't emphasize it. I don't think that's part of our theology. That is to be sure. That is 100% correct. But there's a ton of stuff on heaven, a ton of stuff on hell, a ton of stuff on angels and limbo and demons and all that other good stuff. Every time you say Kaddish, it's for a loved one. That's why we do Yizkor. Is to help them get out of hell a little faster. To help them stop. God forbid they're there. That they're getting tormented, if it ease their journey into the afterlife a little bit more. So we got a ton of stuff on the afterlife. It's just a question of how much of that you want to swallow. That's the question, right? That's really the key. The afterlife, by definition, is a matter of faith. Quite frankly, like most of religion, is a matter of faith, right? You can believe it, or you cannot believe it. No one's come back to tell us. I think I've told the story before that I had a professor who once threatened me to haunt me from the afterlife if I didn't keep studying. And he said he'd come back while I was sleeping, and he'd come over my bed and as an ephemeral spirit, and he would curse me in Yiddish. And then because I don't know Yiddish, I'd have to go look it up. And then by definition, I would have studied. So that was his one of his parting words to me. And so he, was a character. Maybe I'll try to get him on one day. But exactly right. We don't emphasize afterlife in the Reformed tradition, and because it's also not biblical. The Bible doesn't have a whole lot about afterlife in it. A couple fleeting references, maybe in the prophetic works, the later ones. But rabbinic Judaism, Talmud, we got afterlife. We got afterlife everywhere. It's the question of, because we don't know, right? As I've said before, the big steakhouse in the sky, that's what I'm looking for, but I don't know if it's going to work out for me so well. But, we all have our conceptions, right, of what heaven could look like. Or, buy it at all. Right? We have reincarnation in Judaism. It's not. Yeah.
Wow.
It's not normative, but it's there.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. It exists. That's why I'm gonna guess 95% of us in this chat, maybe 100% of us, were named after somebody who has already died.
Right.
Because if you name after somebody who's still living, then their soul could jump into your body.
Oh, is that
and that's a problem.
That's the reason for that?
That's one of the reasons, yeah.
The Sephardic Jews name after the living, though.
Because it's the opposite. Exactly right, because it's the opposite. They think it's bad luck to name after somebody who's died, because then you maybe you're wishing ill upon the person, because maybe they're going to die too. And back to the soul jumping, maybe the person who has died is going to then be confused in the afterlife and come back and inhabit that body.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
Then you need an exorcist.
Oh. And here all this time, I thought it was just an honor to name after somebody that passed away.
Oh,
It is, but the mystics have fun with it, and the Kabbalists have fun, and those who are into that side of things. It's really, it can be really intense, obviously, and so the Sephardic and Ashkenazic skew entirely from it because they see the same problem but differently. They have different solutions. They want to honor somebody, but they also don't want to have bad luck, on somebody. They don't want to do that. And so that's quite a tangent. But that being said, that is exactly right. Because afterlife and afterlife matters are not known, it's hard to use them as a basis of an argument. But the rabbis look at this book, and I think one of the only reasons this book didn't make it into that it did make it into the canon and not into the trash can is because they were able to say afterlife, that's what makes this better, afterlife. Because if you read this thing without the afterlife, it's much rougher. Because this whole sentence afterwards, don't overdo goodness, that's not really a rabbinic model. We would like you to overdo goodness. Please overdo goodness as much as you can. And you know what? Be wise, learn some stuff. That's really good. But the reason he wants you to not do it is because he's the one to get upset later when things don't go your way. Because you'll be saying, I did all this stuff. I donated tzedakah, I studied, I helped people. I was loving, I helped everyone cross the street. I did all this cool stuff and I got the plague, What fairness is that? And going to the other one, same with the wickedness, saying, you know what? But don't give it all up. Because if you're wicked, maybe you'll get the plague also. You're going to get the zets either way. Because sometimes the zets happens and you get it.
Well, you said last week why bad things happen to good people.
Yeah. True. Sometimes you just get the zets, and that's what he's saying.
But you know what, Rabbi? It's last week when we read this, I thought to myself, this is not enjoyable. It's so negative. But this week, as we're reading it, I'm thinking to myself, when you can finally understand that things don't always go the way you want it, bad things can happen, death is inevitable. When you finally understand all of that, I think that also becomes a comfort in a way.
That is really well said. In fact, if I had any wisdom, we would probably end right there because that's exactly right. Honestly, I think that's really the way of looking at this in a positive way. Is that there is something freeing about it. Once you accept some of these things as truths, especially about our mortality, and we talk about this a little bit on the holidays too, right? On Yom Kippur, is that it's sad, but it's also a gift to know that our days are numbered, that we have a finitude to our life, that can drive us, right, to do more and achieve more, to motivate us,
for the good.
Change for the good, exactly right. Knowing that there's an end, and that we don't know when that end is going to be, it can compel us, to more. So I think that's exactly right. I think that's really good. Okay, let me see here. We've covered this already. We've talked about the idea that there's injustice in the world, and that there are scoundrels that are coming from the temple, and sentences that are not executed swiftly, which is what emboldens people to do evil. If they think they can get away with it, right, and there's no punishment, you can keep doing evil until you get caught, until you get busted. That's exactly right. So I'm just going to fast forward a little bit. Let me see here. Let's see. Okay, let's take a little bit of a peek at this. Marilyn Warner, you want to take a little peek here at this?
Sure. For I set my mind to learn wisdom and to observe the business that goes on in the world, even to the extent of going without sleep day and night. And I have observed all that God brings to pass. Indeed, man cannot guess them, events that occur under the sun. For man tries strenuously, but fails to guess them. And even if a sage should think to discover them, he would not be able to guess them.
Indeed. Thank you for that. And so I love this, by the way, because I love the picture of Kohelet tossing and turning at night. One can imagine he had a few restless nights in his life. So I've studied and I've worked so hard and I can't sleep. Oy boy, just all this agita. And then it says, you know what? God's got it handled. And again, we'll see this more in Job as well when we get to Job this year. But the idea that we just don't know. We want to know. And that's sort of, again, the curse in a way for humanity is that we know that we don't know. Like we have enough intellect to ask the question, but not enough to know the answer. It's like we know that there are bigger things around us, but we can't control it and we can't have the answers because only God has the answers. And so I think that's an interesting passage we touched on a little bit last time.
That sounds very much like today with the coronavirus.
Indeed, like that the idea is that there's just so much going on and we don't know and we're constantly learning more. So that's why, for me, it's like, I'm going to wear a mask, I'm going to be inside a lot because I don't know necessarily what else is going to happen. But I'm trying to control what I'm doing. But I keep on finding out more and it's very rarely good news. Okay. Let's see here. Yeah, Marilyn, you think the next paragraph is sort of the same thought here.
Okay. For all this I noted, and I ascertained all this, that the actions of even the righteous and the wise are determined by God. Even love, even hate, man knows none of these in advance, none. For the same fate is in store for all, for the righteous and for the wicked, for the good and pure and for the impure, for him who sacrifices and for him who does not, for him who is pleasing and for him who is displeasing, and for him who swears and for him who shuns oaths.
Because eventually you're going to die. We're back to that again, right?
Rabbi, it's got a little bit of what they call it, what the Calvinists say, predestination.
Yeah, you got it. And there is a great sense in this book of predestination. Kohelet definitely swings that way as opposed to free will. That he has a sense that all of this stuff is written already, which is a blow for free will. And that's, a great rabbinic discussion, obviously, on how much control we actually do have in our lives and how much is foreseen already, how much is already determined for us. Yeah, you got it right on that one, Bob. Let me see here. Bernie, you want to give us a little read?
Yeah. This is a sad thing about all that goes on under the sun, that the same fate is in store for all. Not only that, but men's heart are full of sadness and their minds of madness while they live and then into the dead. For he who is reckoned among the living has something to look forward to. Even a large dog is better than a lion, since the living know they will die, but the dead know nothing. They have no more recompense.
Yep.
for even the memory of them has died.
So this is interesting. He takes another tack here. Yeah, Bernie?
Oh,
I thought you had a question.
Yeah, a lot of what we're reading here, it's talking about the people, but a lot of it too could be like your earthquakes and floods and things like this.
Yep.
Are still part of the same, I guess, same situations.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, is that stuff happens. So you better be ready and you better duck when it's coming.
No partiality.
No partiality, because you know what? The earthquake doesn't care about what you did. It's going to happen. The floods, the hurricanes, exactly right. So exactly right. No, I think you got it. So the same fate's in store. And again, a little cheery here. Men's hearts are full of sadness and their minds of madness. I think the translator had a little fun with the rhyming. But aside from that, the idea being that we got struggle, we got stress. Things are going on. But this is a great line, often quoted, that he had talked a little bit before about almost the happiness of those who died, but now he's going to flip it a little bit. And is that at least when you're alive, you can anticipate, good things happening. You can look forward to stuff. And God, I hate this line, but I love it at the same time. The idea is that a live dog is better than a dead lion. So you can perhaps be of a less than admirable moral character, but you're alive. And a dead lion, obviously a lion, very strong, very brave. But if it's dead, it don't matter. So he sort of plays with that idea about how we live. And like, a lion is majestic, but if it's dead, it's not gonna, do much. And so, but again, we know that we're gonna die, but the dead know nothing. So, okay, so what do you prefer? They have no more, so here the dead have no reward. And again, even the memory of them might fade away. Their loves, their hates, their jealousies have long since perished. They have no more share till the end of time and all that goes under the sun. That's it, they're done. And so what do? Eat your bread in gladness and drink your wine in joy. Someone get me a Chardonnay. For long ago your action was approved by God. Let your clothes be finely and freshly washed, and your head never lack ointment. Enjoy happiness with a woman you love all the fleeting days of life that has been granted to you under the sun, all your fleeting days. For that alone is what you can get out of life and out of the means you acquire under the sun. Whatever it is in your power to do it with all your might. For there is no action, no reasoning, no learning, no wisdom in Sheol, where you are going.
Sounds like it's real.
Life is short, Candy.
This sounds like
I think it's more optimistic than he was last week.
Right.
A little bit more. This is his YOLO passage. You only live once.
Right, exactly.
So don't worry, be happy a little bit. Get yourself a nice drink, get a little meal, go around nicely in your clothing, enjoy your spouse. We can all interpret that. And that's what we got. Because in the end, again, it's done. So enjoy it now. You got
Rabbi,
it now. Yep.
Does the sentence come down one where it said, where are we at? Eat your bread and gladness and drink your wine and joy, for your actions were long ago approved by God. Does that have anything to do with Yom Kippur, where the book is open, who shall live and who shall die?
I think if you're speaking about the grand sense of sort of our deeds being written, and the idea that God has a sense of our span of our days, and has that omniscience, then yes, I think that can be related to Yom Kippur. The idea that God's given you the thumbs up already. go for it. Grab a margarita, grab a grouper sandwich, put your toes in the water. Because eventually it's not going to happen later. This is what you got now, so enjoy it. And not only enjoy it. This is a theological statement. I would argue is that he would say, God wants you to enjoy it, right? Don't live an ascetic sort of life of self-denial. You have stuff, enjoy your stuff. That's okay. God is fine with you enjoying your stuff. Excess is always, tough. That's not always great. Obviously, he'll say that too in the book. But enjoy what you have while you have it. There's no sin there. And that's, again, I think a theological statement that he's making, because there are other faith traditions that would disagree with that, right? And say it's better to give up your possessions and your belongings and not really to enjoy, but we don't have that sort of here. Here it's, enjoy what you have. Good. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. Okay, I see it's 8:02, so I have to get to the end of this. So this is a fun one over here too. Enjoy yourself while you're young, because you know what?
Yeah, that's true.
You might not always work later, so take care of it now. For this last sentence, for youth and black hair are fleeting. So I'm sure we can relate.
When was this written?
About 2,300 years ago. Now, okay, so here's the ending, right, that we have here. Chapter 12. I will make the argument to you in this very brief minute and a half that this argument at the end of this passage was not written by Kohelet. I will make the case that this is actually tacked on at the end when an editor read this book and went, oh, well, I think that's how I imagine the sound that this person made when reading this, because I think they noticed it was problematic and they needed something to make it feel a little bit better for them. And so I think chapter 12, probably in its entirety, but maybe not. Certainly the end, yes. But this first little poetic part here, before the silver cord snaps and the golden bowl crashes, the jar is shattered at the spring and the jug is smashed at the cistern. We should enjoy life, in other words. And the dust returns to the ground as it was, and the life breath returns to God who bestowed it. So again, enjoy life while you have it. But now we have Devar Acher. We have a further word. Against them, my son, be warned. Well, against what? The making of many books is without limit, and much study is a wearying of the flesh. All that stuff that I just said, maybe don't worry about it so much. You can always read and get stressed out. Put down Kierkegaard, put down Nietzsche, put down other books that make you stressed. Maybe don't worry about it so much, because you know what? It doesn't matter. What matters then? The sum of the matter when it's all said and done? Revere God and observe God's commandments. This applies to all humankind, that God will call every creature to account for everything unknown, good or bad. Some of the matter, again, it actually repeats it. It's not a typo, it actually repeats. Is that when it's all said and done, revere God and observe God's commandments. This applies to all humanity. I will make the argument in this last...
Is there something about the yeshiva?
About what?
The yeshiva, the yeshiva boys, who's studying all day and every day.
Studying all the time, but here I think it's this sentence over here that really sticks out to me as dissonant, because not once in the 11 chapters preceding did we have anything remotely connected to this. There was nothing really about revering God. I mean, one can argue that you could find it in places, but it wasn't really there. And certainly the big word here, commandments, did not come in anywhere in 11 chapters before this. What did it say to do? Eat, drink, buy some nice clothes, have some nice conjugal time, don't, that's what it's talking about. It's talking about commandments and about God and about, this sort of prayerful obligations. That's not there in Ecclesiastes. I think that somebody read the first 11 chapters and went, yikes, that this book is purported to be by Solomon. You can't throw it in the dumpster, right? If Solomon is supposed to have written it, right? That's a no-go. You have to use it. You have to canonize it, right, in a way. So it needs something, as we say in the Chemta, it needs some part of comfort that is going to align this more with rabbinic tradition. And what is more in rabbinic tradition than prayer and commandments? That's the definition of rabbinic Judaism, in terms of what they're going to find to be important towards the end of the, first century CE, but even before that, certainly. So that's what I think happened here. I think that those who were editing and those who were crafting the Hebrew Bible, they saw this book and went, "Oi!" Like it's disseminated. People have read it. People know it. We need a better ending. We need a twist to make this thing feel right to us. And so that's what we got now in the end. This little twist that I honestly think was not there, and they put it on just to make us all feel better.
That was my question. So this was an add-on, basically.
That's what I think. I think this is completely an add-on.
Because I noticed that the literature, the style of writing changes also. It was more informal, person to person, and now it becomes a little bit more formal, this last thing that we just read.
Yeah.
Style of writing.
And one can argue, we don't know, obviously, how many hands were in this work when it came to the creation of it. Was it an author? Was it more than one author? Was it a compilation that was later redacted and then edited, and then this piece gets added in towards the end? We don't really have a sense of it, but I think this part to me is very clearly the rabbi is going, wait a minute, before you leave, remember, do those mitzvot. That's the key, even though the entire book says that's not the key. Because it talks about how you might live, you might die, you might be poor.
Music, we call this a coda, C-O-D-A.
Say again?
In music, we would call that a coda, an extra ending.
Yes, it's definitely a coda, I would argue. I think that's 100% correct. Thus concludeth our work on Ecclesiastes. I hope you guys enjoyed and sort of got something from it. It's again a fascinating book, I think, and one that again, anything else can be read at different levels.
Yes.
And so I'm glad we got a chance to study it together. Next week, remember, we're going to have that more information to come out on Thursday. Anti-Semitism lecture with the Holocaust Museum. There's more information on Thursday. Make an effort to spread the word. I think it's going to be a really nice thing in terms of this. I think it's going to be a lot of great discussion. And then November 9th, just as a heads up, because if I know it feels far away, but it really isn't at this point. November 9th is going to be our community Kristallnacht commemoration. And we are also partnering with the Holocaust Museum for that observance. And it's going to be a short program. I'm going to lead, Kaddish for the community and for the museum. And then there's going to be just a fantastic speaker as well. So more information to be revealed in the future. But just wanted to give you just a heads up on those two things. Next week at 6:30, half-hour earlier start for the anti-Semitism lecture. And then I believe it's 7 o'clock. I'll double check for Kristallnacht on November 9th. Okay?
Okay.
Enjoy, everybody. Catch the baseball game if you'd like. Enjoy. Remember, we only live once.
Right.
Who knows next time the Rays are going to be in the World Series? So,
Yay.
Live for today. You don't
Thank you,
know what
Rabbi.
tomorrow's going to bring.
You never know what tomorrow's going to bring. Enjoy. So have a great night, everybody. Okay?
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Good to see
Thank you.